So
That works.
right here, this is the point where you and I no longer confer. So I'm good with that. And I will readdress this with you once I have my data. Okay. Because I don't feel like that's correct. I don't feel like that's the scenario that's taking place. I feel like these are exceptions that we're talking about. And I'm not comfortable applying that shit to every divorce situation. I'm not comfortable applying that to, X amount of women, because it's not happening in these extraordinary numbers. It's not taking place in 60%, 70% of households. These are exceptions to the rule. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that these men are not pursuing custody. They're not, you know what I'm saying? I can't tell you how many times I've seen a man move on and remarry and have another kid. And then all of a sudden he doesn't have time for the kids that he had prior. I've seen that in many situations, but I'm not going to apply that to every situation because I know it's not every situation, but I know it's in a good deal of the ones I've seen lately, so you've got,
I would agree with you on that.
You've got a lot of different circumstances that are lending to that, and you can't just attribute it to the fact that, the wife is a bitch and won't let it. No, that's not the case. The wife has seen for the last 6 weekends when he was supposed to come get these kids, that all of a sudden his pregnant new baby mama is, taking precedence,
So what I'm hearing you say possibly, and I'm not accusing you of anything. I just want to make sure I'm correct. Because it seems to me that the implication is that whenever a dude commits suicide at the end of the divorce, really it's pretty much all on him.
Did you really just say that?
No, I'm asking. I'm not accusing you. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not. I'm simply saying that the implication being that I guess what I'm trying to say is, so then when is there a case where a woman says,
Okay.
hey, I don't want the guy to see his kids because I'm exploiting him during the divorce? I mean, when does that happen?
What do we tell friends and family members of those who commit suicide? It's not your fault, babe. There's nothing you could have said or done.
Right. So I want to know why they do it then.
Why do they do it?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay. Then I guess we would have to, you know what? Let me jump on my Google phone and ask these dudes what to say. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on. We tell survivors of suicide, we tell them it's not your fault. There was nothing. And I'm telling you, I've seen it 1,000 times last week because I hang out in those in those subreddits. Right. I hang out in those situations. I'm in those scenarios looking for the people that I'm out here. You know what I'm saying? So this is familiar territory for me, bub.
I get that. I guess what I'm saying is I tend to hang out in the opposite subreddits.
You do.
I tend to work with men.
And what we say to these people who their family, friends, loved ones have committed suicide, it wasn't something you did. You could have done nothing. Once they've made up their mind to, you know what I mean? Then that's on them. Okay, so I'm not going to sit here and knowing that's what we say to those people and lay some blame on them now. I'm not good with that.
I'm not. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is try to get to the bottom of it and go, then why is this happening? And I don't think it's
what I'll do.
I'll
get my data. I'll grab my whiteboard, my handy dandy little whiteboard, and we're going to work this out because I'd like to have an answer too, and not just sit here and arbitrarily try to assign some blame to a woman who may or may not have, been trying to get him to come get these little badass kids for the last 2 months. And he's too busy with, whatever broad he sees. And I've seen that in so many cases, so
right. And I guess, and I've seen the opposite in a lot of cases, but I would say this. It's just, I guess when I'm connecting the dots, since paternity fraud is not illegal in any state, and I can show, I'll email the link to you.
Okay.
But since it's not illegal.
Cool. The fact is, though, is you're oh man, you're doing the incel thing. Okay.
I'm doing the incel thing. I'm making an observation.
No, it's how it's just like with false rape accusations. Everyone wants to, say, these women, they falsely accused. No, that happens in less than 3% of cases. Okay. Less than 3. Yeah. Pull it up.
I will.
And that's what's on record.
Right. It probably happens more. I agree with you. Just like paternity fraud.
Are you really trying to flip my shit right now? Are you really trying to do that?
No, I agree that
go
it's
ahead and kill this, and I'll come back with all my numbers, and then that's what we'll talk behind.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I'm not with that. I'm not with that at all. Like,
I'm confused.
I'm telling you, just like I can see to you, yes, there are crazy bitches out there, and Heather was one of them. And I know that there are a ton more, but I'm also not going to sit here and assign guilt to women for shit that they're just not doing. You can't sit here and tell me that it's a factual situation when neither one of us have the damn facts in front of us.
Okay. Well, I did have the facts. That's what I was trying to go off. I did research this for another article that I was going to write. And by the way, paternity fraud is pretty common.
Yeah, I get that it's not illegal in any state, but how often does it happen, though?
Right,
how often is a woman on purpose sitting here, hey, this is your baby, knowing it good and damn well it's not his baby?
So paternity fraud is very common in the United States and around the world, according to the American Association of Blood Banks. A research report was submitted by accredited percentage laboratories. The results showed 3 out of every 10 men tested were found not to be the biological father.
How large was the study, though? Give me that.
There were about 300,000 DNA paternity testing cases analyzed.
300,000 out of how many people?
That's a pretty high.
300,000 out of how many billion people on this planet?
I'm confused. I think 300,000 people by any metric is a pretty good large sample size.
Okay. How many women intended?
I don't know that you can get
how many women lied on purpose? How many women lied on purpose? Does your study tell you that?
Well, so because it actually makes a distinction in the study.
Okay. So what are those?
Wrongful paternity or false paternity is different than paternity fraud. So maybe they didn't know, right? So there's that. That's wrongful paternity. Okay. Paternity fraud is where they did know, and that is what that's talking about. Wrong.
You're telling me that 3 out of every 10. That's what you're. I find that incredibly hard to believe.
I know.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to need to, because seriously, one study. Who funded the study?
The American Association of Blood Banks. Okay. So there's that, and then there's others. In another study by the International Journal of Epidemiology and Health, 1 out of 25 men worldwide will raise another man's child and not know it.
1 out of 25? Mm-hmm. How large was that study?
Well, that was across the world. Some of the more recent statistics. So I'll have to look at that. But they basically looked at worldwide. So it's a worldwide case. So this is part of one of the articles, and I'll pull up the actual studies themselves. But I'm just saying, because we're on a podcast, but my point is like it happens more than you think it does. And that's my point. I'm not saying that every woman will do this. That's not my point. I've never said that. I don't think most women will do that.
I cannot.
I just think that men and women are equally evil to each other, but men's is more violent and noticeable and does more physical damage. So it's much easier to recognize. And I just don't think.
And I won't sit here and say that there aren't a shit ton of underhanded, crazy bitches out there. I know there are. Okay. But I'm telling you that it's not as large as people are trying to get. Like that to me is just that incel shit, man.
Yes, but why isn't it against the law?
I wouldn't know. I don't make the laws.
Well, but every form of fraud is against the law, and they don't happen as often as paternity fraud.
Okay. Well, let me tell you this. I'm sitting here wondering why the DOJ doesn't track. When you have 2 officers who are in a romantic relationship and one's beating the ass of the other one, why isn't that tracked? Why isn't domestic violence between officers by the DOJ?
I think it should be tracked for sure. But I would say when you're looking at all 50 states, none of them criminalize it. Not one.
Okay. And that's something that if you feel that strongly about it, then somebody needs to introduce some legislation, because I'm sitting over here on my DOJ reports, damn sure ready to get somebody to introduce some legislation, so
Well, yeah,
that's something that
I actually was thinking about that. I mean, you know me, I'm kind of a doer, so I'd
okay,
actually
cool.
think about putting that
So
together.
get behind that, if
Well,
that's something that,
I
and
definitely
here's the
will,
thing
but
is that obviously no man has stood up and done anything about it.
oh, that's definitely not true. Paul Elam has done a lot of work in that area, and he's
If the
willing to do that.
legislation had been introduced, oh, I'm sure every
No,
incel around here would be on it.
what I'm saying is they couldn't even get the legislation to be introduced. No one wanted to hear it. And so, and because I followed the men's rights movement for a long time, for like 10 years now.
Well, considering
that's not, they've never found any success. So what I'm saying is no one wants to give it, no one cares about that. And my point is that if we live in a world where paternity fraud is legal in all 50 states, then my point is it's not so inconceivable to think that women are taking advantage of guys in family court.
And you know what? Again, until I have those numbers, I'm not going to argue this point with you. All right. Okay. I will reserve the right to reconvene with my dad.
Absolutely. And I'm not really even asking for you to give all the answers. This isn't even really the point that I was making wasn't even to say that I'm right and you're wrong. The point I was making is that it's possible that if we live in the world where this exists, then to me, it's conceivably possible that we live in a world where this other thing exists.
I'm sure that
that's all I was trying to say.
I'm sure that we do. Again, I will give you, there are lots of crazy ass bitches out here, but again, that's not a level that I'm seeing. Okay. Because I don't live in that universe. I don't deal with those type of women. That's not my level. I'm out here on my, what was it? My conservative viewpoint, with the fact that class, it transcends time. Okay.
I agree with you. I mean, we agree on those.
I'm not dealing with these low class ass bitches, is what I'm telling you. So.
Oh, hey, look, you're gonna have to introduce them to me, because from my experience, they come in all shapes and sizes and all different careers.
You know what? Then those bitches are frauds, because you can't.
I just think they're human, is what I think. I don't actually think frauds
class
either.
is inherent. Okay, you cannot. It's not coming and going like a fad. All right, like at the end of the day.
I guess the point I'm making is
I'm still taking my stilettos off in a classy fashion, the same classy way that I put them on this morning. Okay. That's not, it doesn't matter if in the middle of the day, they decide class went out. I don't care.
I think that's true. And I believe everything you say, especially about yourself, because you know yourself. But my point is saying this. I'm not even trying to blame women for what men do. My point is saying that I think that we live in a world full of imperfect people, and that it's not so surprising to me that even though men can be very destructive to women, and I've seen that, and I agree with you, and I'm not contesting anything that you've said in your areas of expertise, absolutely. But my point is
comfortable assigning the blame.
I'm not trying to say that
suicide rates to women. I'm not comfortable with that. It feels very much like that's the connection. It feels very much like that's the connection that you're trying to make, and I'm not comfortable with that.
The connection I'm trying